Hi, welcome to 5931 Business Accounting 5931. So we are looking further into the second lecture. We are moving along in the course. So I think everyone is familiar with the switch to online lecturing, and so as far as the lectures are concerned, we will have this recorded material, and there will be a discussion that is following the lecture, and you can also ask any questions regarding the lecture during the tutorial as well. So let's get it started. So we in the previous class we talked about the the introduction of what kind of statistical methods that businesses employ and what kind of research techniques that should be placed. Why do we need to do research, and what is the role of statistics? Now we'll go further into building a foundation for based on the past research. So basically we're doing review of the past research. So when you are doing research, there are two kinds of ways, two kinds of sources. One is a primary source, the other one is a secondary source. So in a primary source, the authors report the results of the original study in which the data were collected and analyzed. The authors directly report their study. Secondary research, on the other hand, is the authors review the research, but they do not report the results of the original study. So this is called a secondary research route. Both of these are extensively used nowadays, so you should be familiar with the difference between the two. In the second case, they do not report the results of the original study. The other types of classification can be either scholarly or popular. A scholarly work can be like a primary or a secondary source that we talked about in the previous one, and it must meet certain criteria. And what are these criteria that we're talking about? So the work is primarily designed to advance the knowledge in the scientific study of field. So you must make sure that it is going to help the progression of understanding of human knowledge in that field, and authors should be like a professional or an expert in that field, and the work is should be written for general audience with the knowledge in the field. So it need not be understandable to the general public, so but it should be understandable to the somebody who is already working in that field. You cannot use a terminology, or it cannot be too complex that somebody who is familiar and working with that field does not understand. So you need to make sure that the people who are in that, so that's very important. That's called a scholarly work. So the then the work builds on the other scholarly articles that are clearly cited. Now, what is a popular work on the other hand? Popular work can also be categorized. There can be primary and secondary sources. Popular work, it can be written by experts or by others without the specialized knowledge. So they need not be experts. They are primarily meant to educate or entertain a general audience. For example, if you want to do some research, and even though you are not an expert, you are allowed to do that. But it is just a popular research. It is not a scholarly research. You won't be able to publish that in a reputed journal, let's say. So for example, even if you are just doing popular research, you can do like in Wikipedia or a Scientific American, where where the norms are not the strict when it comes to scholarly requirements, and they don't say, oh, what is your qualification, what is your expertise. So that's what a scholarly work, that's what a popular work is, sorry. So let's move on to what a scholarly work is. Scholarly work can also come from basically articles in academic journal. These are the fundamental sources of a scholarly work. Somebody who has already worked in this, they would have published their work in a reputed journal or an academic journal. So that the reason why the scholarly I mean that would be considered as a scholarly work is because every single article that is published, every single article that is published in a journal, it goes through what we call a peer review process. What is a peer review? You publish something, then there are a few people in that field who will review that paper and then say, hey, this is not good, why don't you change it? This is not good, why don't you change it? And then you might have to address all those. That's called rebuttal. and then you ensure the quality of that work. So that's called a peer review process. That is why articles in the academic journals are considered very scholarly. Now we're looking at the primary sources in the academic journals can be report of a method and results of the organization research study. The secondary sources could be like basically a literature review. You probably know what a literature review is. If you want to investigate on a particular research, you need to know what was there any previous work that was done on this topic, and you need to review the past research. That's called basically a literature review. A meta-analysis is also a type of review in which the results of the past research are synthesized, but no original data were collected or analyzed. So you don't do any analysis by yourself. So you just trust the research from that is done by other people in the past, and then you use the data, you synthesize the data. That means you modify, play with the data a little bit, and then you use the data. Then commentaries like critique or comments about the published research article, that will also be a secondary source. So what are the other types of scholarly work? We might have conference papers, we have manuscripts, books that are written by scholars, then thesis and dissertations. Like for example, if you did a master's degree or a doctorate degree, people are required to do submit their dissertations and work. So that can also be considered as scholarly work, even though those may not be deemed as experts, or they may be really young. Their work will be considered still scholarly. Then undergraduate research can also be considered scholarly work, and abstracts, they are also scholarly work. So the database research is basically, we can look at like a library database. um, it is, if you look at the library database, it is basically a list of sources that meet certain criteria. So it would be information of the author, the source, the year published. So these are the basic requirements. If you want to quote, if you want to find a search, find an article, you need to use some basic guidelines to do that research. So what are this? So you probably would need to know the author who wrote this, and you probably would need to know in which journal was it published and which year was it published. So these are usually databases are based on discipline. So we have one database for medical journals, one database for transport related journals. So basically the database search. The database search, if you continue, then we look at we start very broadly. We identify the best keywords. Keywords are the fundamental points where you can use, and then that gives you a sense of research done on the topic. Then you can like fine tune your topic and customize to your work that you want to do. Then that's a broad research. But you can also do narrow search, identify the articles that are absolutely very close to what you are doing. So then that limits the or maybe you can limit that to the recent research. That means you are, this is 2020, you maybe you don't want any articles that were published beyond 2018. So most of the databases have that searching filtering technique. So you can actually ask the database to see, hey, give me only those that were published in the last 2 years. Then that's a very good database research. That means you are looking at the latest research. Then the more important strategies, like you can use one source to find authors, you can use authors, and you can use relevant journals to find the research, to find the articles. So what about internet searches? We have what we call Google Scholar. It is like you probably know Google, what Google is like. And Google have, this is one of the streams where you can find abstracts for sure. Sometimes you will get the full text, but that depends on the kind of article, whether it is very popular, and it also depends on the organization who did the research. So but it is very good. Sometimes you will be very good, very helpful to find the full text of the article, but sometimes you might need to um, you might need to be happy with the abstract alone. So you are definitely unlikely to find many scholarly articles during like a basic web search. Basic web search doesn't work. So you need to go through Google Scholar only if you want to um, get the article or specific article that you're looking for. You can find the full text of a source from a library database or on a Google Scholar. Or as I told you, you can try on a Google Scholar. On author's website, this is a very good resource. So somebody, let's say you wanted to go library database or a Google Scholar, and you find an author, and that author hasn't displayed his entire full text article on the Google Scholar page. So what you can do is you can go to the author's website and request him. Maybe he might ask you to pay a fee, or maybe he might be willing to give it to you for free, or he might be pointing you in the right direction, saying, so it's always a good idea. So we can also search by college libraries, and sometimes even if your library doesn't have it, so they can request an interlibrary loan. Maybe other library has it, and your libraries are very cooperative in this scenario. And maybe you can contact the author directly. You can just sometimes authors leave their phone numbers or email addresses, so you find that person and then you track him down and ask him directly. So reading and evaluating primary research articles. So when a primary research article, it will have a different appearance from the research papers. So you need to know that the format of a manuscript is totally different when it comes to published articles. So a published article can serve as a model, but you should format the paper according to the guidelines of your discipline. So that is the like you can also use unpublished versus unpublished manuscripts. They can also be used, but make sure that you have to exercise some caution while using them. So the primary research organization of a primary research article will be fundamentally understood and accepted throughout the world as this. So you need to have a title, you need to have like a description of the study, and then you need to have authors. Who are the ones who conducted? What are the organizations that conducted? And who is the first author? Right? Those are very important. That means, so now if the author, why is the author important? If he is somebody who is already deemed as an expert in the field, then that article weighs more credibility. And then the abstract. Sometimes abstract is sufficient to understand the outline of the study. Then we have the next part will be introduction. You in the introduction we talk about what is the overview of the past research, what do you understand, why are you doing this. So basically we'll give an introduction to the primary research article, and then we explain what is the technique, what is the methodology that you are going to use, what are the measures that you are going to use, and what is there any design principles that the users that the readers need to understand. What are the procedures? Let us say you're collecting a survey. How are you collecting the survey? Let us say you're doing an experiment. What techniques are you using to do the experiment? All these, they come under methods and methodology. And then you publish the results. So you check the hypothesis, you found something, you can answer the questions based on the statistical significance. So statistical significance testing means, like, if you find a result, you need to establish that the result is statistically significant. I cannot stress this enough. So when you find a difference between the observed value and the expected value, you not only say, oh, my observed value is really different from the expected value. That is not sufficient. You need to establish, if you want to say that there is a statistically significant difference between the observed value and the established value, only then your research is deemed valued. Otherwise anybody can do like the research and say claim this. So there has to be some statistical testing in place to ensure that the validity of the test is good. Then organization of primary research article, you need to have a discussion, right? After that, after the results are published, you need to have discussion. That is the reason why you are doing research. You want to further the knowledge of the community, of the scientific community. So what does the results, you made a hypothesis or you made a claim, and you check your claim, and then you discuss that claim. So, and then what are the limitations of the study, and what can be done in the future, what do you recommend? So that is what that those are the compositions. Then how do you evaluate a study? You need to evaluate through the power of the study, and then you need to have validate the study internally and externally. What do you mean by this? So internally, so by within the data has to be validated within the scope of the data that is collected. So external validation means when the data is external and you want to do the validation externally, you want to simulate the external data and and validate it against that external data. So that is called external validation. So external validation tells you, let us say the amount of you are doing particular research on a on a set of, I don't know, on a group of individuals. So external validation comes from outside the scope of this study. So then you say, oh, you see there is also a similar thing, and they can validate the results that you have done. So that is called external validation. And then we have references. We list all the sources that are cited in the article. Then the shape of a primary research, it goes through all this as we have discussed so far. Then we have introduction, and then we review the past literature. Then we focus on the current study, and then we explain the method that we are typically using. This is very narrow, as you can see. And then we explain the results analysis conducted on the hypothesis. Now then when we are discussion, we summarize the result that becomes broader a little bit, then put it into the context, identify directions of future research. See how it's like this, it is shaped, it is like a sand cone. So initially it is broader, and then we go into the narrow details of what we are doing and what our results are, and then we open it up again to the scientific community to understand and further our knowledge. So we develop the ideas such as based on the study, we replicate the study, and then we examine the topic with a different research design, and we conduct a similar study and examine how, like another variable. Like for example, if you are testing 5 variables, maybe somebody will come say, oh, maybe why don't you check that research by and distinguish between the males and the females. So then that could be a good adding another variable might impact the results. Though citing the sources, we will be familiar with the APA. We will familiarize ourselves with the APA pattern, and you need to take a look at how a citation has to be. If you are doing the number of if there is only one author, how you do that citation. If there are two authors, so you can use both their last names. And if you have 3 to 5 authors, you can put three names. There is no problem. But if you have more than 5, let's say, it's very easy to use hill et al, like just use the first author's name, then et al, etc., others. So that means that way you don't need to keep on typing and keep on using the long lines. So the second citation, if you are using it for the first time, you can give it like that. But if there are too many people, then you can, the later citations, you can use it like that. Okay, 6 or more, you don't even need to put it. You don't even in the first citation you can put it like that, because you don't want to put so many names of the authors in the research paper. You want to put them in the references. So you just need to make sure that whenever their authors are like more than 6, more than 5, so it's very hard to put all their names on the paper. So the APA style referencing is something. Let me. So you see the last name and the initials, and see all the authors, and we have the date, and we have the space between the dates, and we have uh, personal resources, hope and achievement among the. This is the title. So the title of the author, then the conversation of the resource perspective, journal of happiness studies. So we have this journal, what the journal is. We have the page numbers where we can find them out, and we name the volume 16. That means This journal has published several articles, and we are looking at volume 16, and then you need to go to these pages. So that is called fundamentally an APA style referencing. This is the most standard used, even if you have submitted a master's thesis or even any paper. So this is the type of style that we use, and moreover, like we need to use the indentation properly. So basically, what research is about using the past to inform the present, finding and evaluating past research. It helps you identify the current state of knowledge. We can identify the questions that can be examined to progress the scientific understanding. That is the whole goal, right? We need to make sure our knowledge is moving in the forward direction. And formatting and APA style make the process a little bit more efficient and simpler, because if everybody follows the same style, then it will become easier, and that creates a norm against which a good texting and good style was established. So that would be the end of lecture. So we have basically learned a little bit about literature review and how we need to cite, and we learned a little bit about the differences between academic scholarly work and a popular work, and then we looked at how the importance of academic journals, and a few of the referencing styles such as APA style. So any further questions at this point?